8:48 now here in WCNC Plus, and earlier this hour we heard from members of the Trump administration with the latest on those ongoing strikes against Iran.
Well, many people, many lawmakers divided on the president's actions over the weekend. Take a look here in North Carolina. A new Catawba College YouGov poll shows 63% of Republicans support U.S. military action in Iran, while 68% of Democrats do not support military action, almost a total inverse there. Joining us now to talk about it, Catawba College political professor Michael Bitzer. We do want to talk to you about the primary day tomorrow, but put on your statistician hat first. What is your reaction to this poll? We should say it was taken in January, I believe, but it does give us a sense for how our neighbors feel about this conflict.
It certainly does. And we asked in January, at the time, there were massive demonstrations against the Iranian regime, and we asked about military strikes to support those particular protests. And overall, North Carolinians were against it, but it was fairly close in terms of the margin of error. But that partisan divide that you pointed out is kind of a classic dynamic that we are seeing play out nationally and here in North Carolina. And if you asked somebody who was an independent, not a partisan on initial identification, 50% of them were against it. So we're going to go into the field next week for our March survey to ask the same question again, now that we actually have military operations in the Middle East, and see what changes in terms of the dynamics.
It will be interesting to see those results, especially given the events over the past weekend. All right, so let's switch gears now and talk about the primary. Of course, the early voting ended over the weekend. Tomorrow is the actual primary. What are your thoughts on this? Of course, it outperformed early voting in 2022, even 2024 in the presidential primary. What are you thinking about this year's primary?
This one's off the charts, and so we're going to really have to wait and see who shows up tomorrow for Election Day. But if these are any indicators, if you look within the total numbers, it was a real reversal of what we thought would be happening. You know, we all believe that the more competitive U.S. Senate contest for the nomination was on the Republican side. We thought it was basically going to be a coronation of Roy Cooper on the Democratic side. That script has basically flipped, and there were much more Democratic ballots taken during the early voting period than Republicans, and also unaffiliateds who tend to migrate towards the more competitive primary actually pulled more Democratic primary ballots than Republican. So this may be an early indication of what we're seeing in terms of energy and enthusiasm on the Democratic side. Again, we've got to wait and see what the dynamics are like for tomorrow's vote, but these are very impressive numbers coming in terms of early ballots cast.
Can you glean something from that, or can that be explained? We've talked about in the past that blue wave that happens on election night, and it's all the early voters that voted early and they say we're Democrat, and then that changes everything. I mean, can you attribute some of that to just like sort of party preferences of whether you early vote or not?
Well, this we have to remember this is a primary election, so we're really dealing with two discrete battles going on. When you try to compare the two, there's a little bit of hesitancy in terms of extrapolating to the general election. But I look at these numbers and say, you know what, there is something going on with energy and enthusiasm on the Democratic side, at least here in North Carolina. And if that translates over the next 9 months, if that leads into November, then I think we can see the confirmation of what we are seeing in other dynamics, particularly special elections, Democrats overperforming, Republicans not performing as well. Now, here in North Carolina, Republicans have a built-in advantage when it comes to general elections. So Democrats have ground that they must make up in order to be competitive. But Roy Cooper has unlocked that box here in North Carolina to win as many times in Republican federal elections to be able to win as governor, for example. So I think this is going to be the real, kind of talk over the next 9 months after we get past Tuesday.
So you talked about the Senate race, of course, that's the big one that many people are looking at. Does Roy Cooper just glide through? Is this just another win for him that he checks off easily?
I don't want to make any predictions, but it feels like, certainly there haven't been the kind of candidates that would put up the challenge. They need name recognition. They need name ID across the state. They need funds and money to advertise. I haven't seen any of that kind of dynamic in any of the other Democratic candidates against Roy Cooper. So my expectation is that he will have a very good evening come tomorrow night. We'll just have to wait and see what the percentage is in terms of his vote gains.
Rarely, if ever, do you ever have a state Senate seat that is more exciting than a U.S. Senate seat. But you might just have one. And it's not a Charlotte race for our viewers, so you'd be forgiven if you don't know about it. But instead, it involves the Senate Majority Leader, Phil Berger, arguably the most powerful person in the state of North Carolina. And he is facing up what is a very significant challenger.
Very much so. In Rockingham County, where Phil Berger is based out of, that county's sheriff, Sam Page, is challenging Senator Berger. This is really a grudge match between these two gentlemen, and local politics is so dominant in this that all of us are basically going to be sitting on our couches, eating our popcorn and hitting refresh on that particular primary dynamic. A lot of this is based in Rockingham County, but the wild card is in Guilford County. Part of that district is in Guilford. And actually, there are more voters in Guilford than in Rockingham County in total. But we're seeing Rockingham County in the early votes well outperform Guilford. So this kind of dynamic is something that we're going to watch. This is indeed the most powerful Republican, as you noted, in the state for the past 15 years. This is a real challenge to see if he can hold on to power or if we have a new day in North Carolina politics.
And if he loses, what does that say about the state of politics here in North Carolina? And then what happens in Raleigh? I mean, he has an entire infrastructure there that operates under him.
It does, and I think the big question will be who is going to start jockeying for to be the next president pro tem, to be the leader of the state Senate for Republicans. I think that's going to be a very fascinating contest to kind of watch, and it could also have a play in terms of the dynamics of our state budget. Reminder: we don't have a new state budget; we're operating under the old one, and it's been at loggerheads between the House and the Senate in terms of the leadership priorities. If Phil Berger was to lose, does that change that dynamic and we get a new state budget where new leaders come to agreement over? We'll just have to kind of wait and see. There's still, several months to see this play out if he were to lose. But right now, no bets in terms of who's going to win between Berger and Page.
What else are you looking for tomorrow? What else has piqued your interest in this primary?
Well, I think certainly in Mecklenburg, the Cunningham race is going to be one to watch. That could be, the Democratic Party's version of what is going on with Berger and Page. I think there are a couple other, particularly congressional races across the state. The first, with its Republican primary, that is a lean Republican district now that it's been redistricted, but we'll have to watch and see what the national dynamics play out. And then in the fourth congressional district around Durham and the Triangle, there's a real competitive, what looks like Democratic primary going on there against an incumbent, against a progressive on that regard. The other one is out in the western part, the Democratic primary for the North Carolina 11th. The DCCC has thrown its support behind one of the candidates. We'll see if he can pull that off as well. So it's going to be a busy night yet again in North Carolina elections.
Always exciting. And to that point, in some of these races, because you've alluded to it before, we have sort of self-segregated ourselves and our communities as far as political ideas and things like that. In some of these races that you just mentioned, whoever wins the primary is more likely going to go straight ahead and win the general election because these districts are so heavily slanted, either Republican or Democrat.
Exactly. I mean, we are basically having the general election for a significant majority of all of these contests tomorrow. And because of the self-segregation, and then layer on top of that the lines that have been drawn, basically the true general election contest is during the primary contest. So many of these state legislative districts, so many of the congressional districts, the winner is going to be determined when we know the election results tomorrow night as opposed to November.
You can't underscore the importance of the primary enough.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm just going to wait till the midterms. I'm going to wait till November. So much of that is determined in those primaries.
If you wait, you miss all the action.
Lose out.
You
Exactly.
lose out. All right. Professor Bitzer, as always, we appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking to him as well on Wednesday morning, the morning after,
Yes.
to see how things panned out.
All right, time for us to take a quick break. Thanks for staying with us this morning here on WCNC Plus. At the top of the hour, our Jane Monreal takes over from our live Impact studio. Again, continue streaming live here on WCNC Plus.